But Baalbek, if there was one example, one ancient site on Earth that is evidence of a lost, ancient, advanced civilization.
A single stone block in Lebanon weighs 1,500 tons. That's heavier than 10 blue whales stacked on top of each other.
This is Baalbek in the Lebanon. Each of these 3 blocks weighs 900 tons.
Our most powerful cranes today can barely lift 20% of that weight. Yet somehow, ancient people not only moved these monsters but placed them with surgical precision 23 feet in the air. After decades of investigation, we finally know who did this and how.
This block and another 2 are actually far older than the Roman period.
And the answer will completely change how you think about ancient civilizations. Cracking the ancient mystery of Baalbek. Before we tell you how this was built, you need to understand just how impossible it should be. The largest stone ever moved by modern machinery weighs 340 tons. At Baalbek, there are stones weighing 1,500 tons.
And Baalbek has the largest stones that were ever quarried in human history, the largest stones that were lifted, stacked, and transported in human history, and the largest stone columns in all of classical history.
Over 4 times heavier, placed with millimeter precision. NASA's Vehicle Assembly Building crane, one of the world's strongest, couldn't even lift these blocks. Imagine trying to move the Statue of Liberty. Now imagine moving 5 of them stacked together. But here's what really makes your head spin. The Romans, who were obsessed with bragging about their engineering feats, wrote absolutely nothing about these massive stones. Not a single mention. Think about that for a moment. We're talking about the same civilization that documented everything, from building aqueducts to constructing the Colosseum. They loved showing off their architectural achievements. Yet when it comes to Baalbek, known to them as Heliopolis, their records are completely silent about the trilithon and these colossal blocks.
You don't see the Roman foot in those stones, which is weird. You would expect to see some sort of breakdown of the Roman foot in these measurements, but they're not there at Baalbek.
This silence is deafening, and it raises a huge question. Were these stones already there when the Romans arrived? Did they simply build their temples on top of an existing foundation that was far older than anyone realizes? It's like discovering that someone built a skyscraper on top of mysterious ancient foundations, but never bothered to mention who created those foundations or how they got there in the first place.
For all the feats of Roman history, why would they have the most impressive feats over 2,000 miles away from the capital?
This gap in the historical record has opened the door to some wild theories. Some researchers believe Baalbek's true origins stretch back thousands of years before the Romans, possibly to a time when human civilization possessed knowledge and techniques that have since been completely lost to history. And that's exactly why Baalbek isn't just an archaeological puzzle. It has become crucial to some of the most controversial debates in ancient history. We're not just talking about missing construction records here. We're talking about the possibility that this site holds secrets about human capabilities that don't fit our current understanding of the past. The megalithic stones of Baalbek in Lebanon have left every expert, historian, and engineer completely speechless.
Roman architecture always uses the most impressive things right in the front. You walk in the front of the thing, and that's where you're going to see the biggest stones, the most impressive, for obvious reasons. These are in the back, completely on the opposite end of the entrance.
These stones are so huge that they challenge everything we know about ancient construction. But it doesn't stop there. Even modern construction techniques and sophisticated machinery cannot withstand these structures.
We're talking about pillars buried in dirt. It's 2024. Do not tell me that we do not have the technological capability to dig rocks up.
Some say the structures signify some powerful civilization, while others think they show something beyond our physical world. Every aspect of the structure from the size of blocks used to their impeccable placement, represents outstanding engineering, the type of which we may never see elsewhere in the world. These aren't your average building blocks. The trilithon, as they are called, is 3 huge limestone slabs stretching 62 feet long, 14 feet high, and 12 feet wide. The weight of each one begins around 800 tons. But as extraordinary as that is, it isn't the most mind-blowing part. These giant stones aren't just sitting on the ground. They're suspended 23 feet in the air, fitted together perfectly with no space for even a speck of dust. Now, think about this for a second. How do you even begin to move something that weighs as much as several jumbo jets, let alone lift it up and place it with surgical precision? And remember, this was accomplished thousands of years before we had cranes, hydraulic lifts, or modern machinery. But here's where things get really interesting. About half a mile from the main temple, there's a quarry that holds even bigger secrets. It looks like the birthing place of the stones, with evidence that they weren't supposed to be the only ones. Sitting there, abandoned for centuries, are 3 unfinished stone blocks that make the trilithon look small by comparison. The first one is what they call the Stone of the Pregnant Woman. It weighs nearly 1,000 tons. Then there's the Stone of the South, discovered in the 1990s, weighing a staggering 1,200 tons. And if that doesn't blow your mind, archaeologists found an even bigger one in 2014, the Forgotten Stone, which weighs around 1,500 tons. The local legends around these stones are fascinating too. One story tells of a pregnant woman who convinced the people to feed her by claiming she knew the secret to moving these massive blocks. Hence, the name Stone of the Pregnant Woman. Another speaks of supernatural beings, such as pregnant jinn, who were supposedly responsible for cutting and transporting them. Some locals even believe touching the Stone of the Pregnant Woman can increase fertility. These folk tales might sound far-fetched, but they reveal that these monuments have puzzled people for generations, each one passing down stories that try to justify the seemingly impossible. Even modern engineers are equally baffled. One study suggested you'd need over 500 people working with sophisticated machines to move a 557-ton block across flat ground. But moving it uphill and lifting it 23 feet into the air? Engineers today estimate you'd need 40,000 workers. That's more people than the population of most small cities. And that raises the ultimate question: why? Why would ancient builders choose to work with stones so impossibly large when smaller ones would have been just as effective? What drove them to attempt something that pushes the boundaries of what seems physically possible, even by today's standards? The Baalbek megaliths don't just challenge our understanding of ancient engineering, they completely rewrite it. And the more we study them, the more questions they raise about what our ancestors were truly capable of achieving. The question of who built Baalbek has sparked more arguments, theories, and sleepless nights among researchers than almost any other ancient mystery. And the more evidence we uncover, the more complicated the answer becomes. Fact or myth? All right, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Baalbek has spawned some absolutely wild theories over the centuries, and it's not hard to see why. When you're staring at stones that weigh as much as these stones, perfectly fitted with ancient technology, your brain starts reaching for explanations that feel as extraordinary as what you see. The supernatural theories go way back. Local legends claimed that Cain built the temple while wandering the earth under God's curse. Other stories said Nimrod ordered giants to construct it as part of the Tower of Babel project. Some whispered about the Nephilim, those mysterious giants mentioned in ancient texts, being the real architects. But in our modern age, The most popular theory has gone full sci-fi. The ancient alien hypothesis suggests that only beings with technology far beyond anything humans possessed could have moved and positioned these massive stones. Writers like Graham Hancock and Zecharia Sitchin have kept these ideas alive, proposing everything from lost advanced civilizations to the Anunnaki, the otherworldly beings from Mesopotamian mythology. So if these stones are so impossible to move, how do skeptics explain Baalbek? Let's test their theories against the actual evidence, and you'll see why none of them fully work. Now, here's where science steps in with a reality check. Archaeologists point out that what seems impossible might just be really, really difficult. The Romans were absolute masters of engineering. They had sophisticated cranes, pulley systems, capstans, and massive wooden wheels. We have examples of Roman engineering feats all across the ancient world that prove they could move enormous weights. When you examine the Baalbek stones up close, you can actually see chisel marks carved into them, which is clear evidence of human craftsmanship. Experimental archaeologists have attempted to replicate ancient construction techniques and shown that while it would require incredible organization and massive amounts of labor, it's not beyond human capability. Still, skeptics argue that these explanations don't fully account for the sheer size of the heaviest stones, which seem to exceed the known limits of Roman machinery, leaving open questions that fuel speculation. So why do these extraordinary theories persist? Maybe it's because ordinary explanations don't fire up our imagination the way extraordinary ones do. Philosopher Daniel Dennett once suggested that when people lack imagination about what's actually possible, they lean toward supernatural explanations. Baalbek continues to captivate us because it sits right on that border between documented fact and tantalizing legend. There are no detailed ancient records explaining exactly who ordered its construction or how the work was organized. That silence creates this perfect blank canvas where people can project their own theories and stories. Some see it as evidence of lost civilizations with advanced technology. Others view it as proof of extraterrestrial contact. Scientists see it as a testament to human engineering capabilities that we're still trying to fully understand. And maybe that's the real magic of Baalbek. It's not just about massive stones or ancient construction techniques. It's about how a single archaeological site can simultaneously challenge our understanding of the past while inspiring our wildest theories about what might be possible. The truth is, whether built by ingenious humans or mysterious forces, Baalbek remains one of the most extraordinary achievements in human history. And that's pretty incredible, either way you look at it. Modern investigations and findings. When archaeologists finally got permission to dig deep at Baalbek, what they found changed everything. Pottery with cuneiform writing proves people were here thousands of years before the Romans. Stone blueprints carved directly into the temple floors. And most shocking of all, construction techniques that match buildings in Jerusalem with impossible precision. While everyone's been debating how the stones were moved, there's been over a century of serious scientific investigation quietly uncovering the real secrets of Baalbek. And what researchers have found is absolutely fascinating. The modern scientific story begins in 1898, when Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany visited the site. His visit sparked the first major archaeological excavations that ran until 1904. What started as imperial curiosity turned into groundbreaking research that began rewriting Baalbek's entire history. Each layer they uncovered raised more questions than answers. The most shocking revelation came when they cleaned the Temple of Jupiter and found evidence that human settlement at Baalbek goes all the way back to the Neolithic period. We're talking about people living on this site potentially 10,000 years ago, long before anyone thought this place was significant. If people lived at Baalbek 10,000 years ago, it suggests the site's importance goes way deeper than Roman colonization, and that the massive foundation stones, the trilithon and other megaliths, have been in place before colonization by the Romans. Hence, the complete silence by the Romans. After all, you couldn't expect the Romans to document how they came about if they knew nothing about it. Meanwhile, the theory that an ancient settlement capable of such sophisticated engineering remains. Finding out that the structure predates Roman settlement doesn't solve the engineering puzzle. If anything, it's more evidence that a particular civilization existed before the Romans that had engineering methods that are currently lost to humans. However, another breakthrough that may help us get more explanation was unearthed in 2004 when Lebanese University teamed up with the German Archaeological Institute for a major collaborative project focused on documenting those mysterious ancient quarries. What they found was mind-blowing. They discovered Persian pottery fragments marked with cuneiform writing dating back to the 6th and 4th centuries BCE. So, were the Persians behind these giant structures? The Persian pottery fills a crucial gap, but we already know from the Neolithic discovery that the settlement goes way back 10 millennia ago. Again, it tells us it was there before the Romans, suggesting continuous occupation of the lands until the Romans took over. This raises a new question of whether the Persians have always been the original inhabitants of the land, therefore, the ones who carved the monoliths. The Persians have organizational capacity as well as the engineering knowledge to accomplish remarkable structures. Theoretically, they can handle megalithic constructions and are viable candidates for the megalith builders. The Persian Empire is also known for massive construction projects like the ones at Persepolis. However, the structures built by the Persians, like those at Persepolis, are still nothing compared to the monoliths at Baalbek. The Persepolis structures, for example, are made up of small blocks that weigh between 1 and 20 tons, while blocks at Baalbek weigh over 100 times more. The approaches are also different. The builders at Persepolis worked by breaking large boulders into smaller forms, which contrasts with the Baalbek builders who favored larger blocks. Additionally, the Persians do not have any record crediting them with building the Baalbek stones. Just like the Romans, they were completely silent on the construction. That may be understandable considering the Persians were not as detailed or keen on preserving history as the Romans. So, maybe they did build Baalbek and were let down by their poor record-keeping. But there's another issue. The Persians never demonstrated the ability to move stones remotely close to Baalbek's scale. While the Persians were accomplished builders, the megalithic construction at Baalbek represents something far beyond anything they demonstrated elsewhere. Surely, we should have seen them demonstrate the same skill in other places, if they were capable. The pottery fragments, marked with cuneiform writing, prove that they were there. But the engineering challenge of the megaliths seems to exceed their demonstrated capabilities. Now, that wasn't even the biggest surprise. German researcher Margaret van Es made another crucial discovery when she studied how these massive stones were actually cut. She found that the ancient builders were incredibly smart. They cut the megaliths along natural fissures between rock layers. This technique made it much easier to remove enormous blocks without cracking or breaking them. What's really interesting is that this same method shows up in other Roman projects, like the famous Pont du Gard aqueduct in France. So we know the Romans had this technique in their engineering toolkit. The more we learn about Baalbek through scientific investigation, the more questions seem to emerge. Each discovery doesn't just add to our knowledge, it completely reshapes what we thought we knew about this incredible site. Now, let's discuss something most people never hear about: the actual Roman blueprints carved right into the site itself. These are not drawings on papyrus that crumbled away centuries ago. We're talking about architectural plans literally etched into the stone floors. The German excavations between 1900 and 1904 were the first to document these incredible finds. The most striking discovery was a detailed blueprint carved directly onto the floor of the great courtyard. This wasn't some rough sketch. It was a precise floor plan of part of the hexagonal courtyard, drawn to an impressive scale of about ratio 1 to 12 to 6. Think about what this means. These weren't just skilled laborers throwing stones together. These were master planners who carefully calculated every angle, every measurement, every design element before they placed a single block. Were these carvings practical guides for construction workers? Or were they something more, like symbols of engineering pride to show off the incredible skill of the architects? However, the most shocking connection emerged when researchers took a closer look at Podium 1, which is the foundation supporting the 6 massive columns that still dominate the skyline today. When they analyzed the construction techniques, they found something absolutely startling. The style and methods used in Podium 1 were virtually identical to Herodian architecture found in Jerusalem. These were precise matches. Both sites used the exact same pattern of alternating headers and stretchers. Both featured an identical drafted margin stonework. Even the average course height was exactly the same at 3.6 feet. That's way too specific to be a coincidence. This suggests there might have been direct involvement of Herodian builders at Baalbek, or at least shared construction traditions connecting these sites across the ancient world. So step by step, from Kaiser Wilhelm's initial visit to these modern discoveries, our picture of Baalbek has become incredibly rich and complex. What started as a site famous just for its massive stones has turned into this amazing historical textbook spanning the Neolithic period, Persian civilization, Roman engineering, and Herodian construction techniques. Every single discovery raises new questions. Who really built this place? Why did they use these specific techniques? And how much more is still buried under centuries of soil, waiting to be uncovered? Now that you understand the engineering impossibility, here's what makes it even more mysterious. This site has been continuously occupied for 11,000 years. Each civilization that found it treated it as sacred, but none of them claimed to have built those massive foundation stones. Let's go through the years to explore how each civilization has leveraged the structure. Baalbek through the civilizations. In 1984, UNESCO recognized Baalbek as a World Heritage Site, putting it on the map as one of humanity's most important archaeological treasures. But this wasn't the first time Baalbek had captured the world's attention. Baalbek is a site that has witnessed over 11,000 years of human history. That's right, 11,000 years. That means it was already standing when the Egyptians were wondering how to bring about the pyramids. Archaeological evidence shows people were living on this hilltop as early as 9000 BCE. That's mind-blowing when you think about it. Excavations have turned up pottery from the Chalcolithic period, Bronze Age artifacts, and architectural fragments that tell the story of civilization after civilization building on the same sacred ground. The first settlers chose the highest point of the hill for their community. Even the Romans did the exact same thing thousands of years later. They placed their altar on the summit. They all knew how special this spot was. Everything about the site is fascinating, even the name. Scholars believe Baalbek comes from Baal Nebk, which means Lord of the Source. This refers to a natural spring near the site that likely made this hilltop a sacred place of life and abundance for ancient peoples. Around 3200 BCE, The Phoenicians took over and turned Baalbek into something truly spectacular. They built a massive temple complex dedicated to their gods, Astarte and Baal, the sky god who probably gave the city its name. You can even still find traces of this Phoenician temple buried beneath the later Roman temple of Jupiter. Under Phoenician rule, Baalbek became a pilgrimage destination. People traveled from across the ancient world to worship Baal-Hadad, the fertility god, and Atargatis, the goddess of love and motherhood. But here's where things get really interesting. Many researchers suspect that those massive stones we've been talking about, the trilithon and the other massive blocks forming the Western Wall, might actually date back to this Phoenician period, not the Roman era. That means we could be looking at 5,000-year-old engineering that involved moving and precisely placing stones weighing hundreds of tons. With nothing but human power, basic tools, and techniques we can barely comprehend today. The question isn't just how did they do it anymore, it's how did they even conceive of doing something this ambitious? What drove ancient people to attempt construction projects that challenge our modern understanding of what's physically possible? When Alexander the Great conquered this region in 334 BCE, he gave Baalbek a makeover, including renaming it Heliopolis, the city of the sun. But the real transformation began when the Romans took over. First came Pompey the Great in 64 BCE. Then Julius Caesar made it an official Roman colony in 47 BCE. But it was Emperor Augustus around 16 BCE who really went all out, launching the most ambitious construction project the ancient world had ever seen. Interestingly, the Romans didn't just bulldoze everything and start fresh. Instead, they merged their god Jupiter with the local deity Baal, creating this powerful hybrid god called Jupiter Baal. It was like ancient cultural diplomacy through architecture. The construction timeline is staggering. Emperor Nero continued building the massive Temple of Jupiter. Emperor Antoninus Pius threw in the Temple of Bacchus. And finally, the Severan dynasty completed the whole complex with the Temple of Venus in the 3rd century. At its absolute peak, it had towering columns stretching toward the sky, marble surfaces gleaming in the sunlight, and thousands of pilgrims flooding the courtyards. Anyone standing there would have felt like they were literally at the center of the divine universe. But then, Christianity changed everything. When Emperor Constantine converted in the early 300 CE, construction stopped. Emperor Theodosius went even further. He destroyed pagan statues, tore down altars, and converted the sacred spaces into Christian churches. The Temple of Venus became a chapel. The hexagonal courtyard was turned into a church. Emperor Justinian ordered 8 massive columns from the Temple of Jupiter to be shipped all the way to Constantinople to decorate the Hagia Sophia. These stones were so magnificent that an emperor wanted them for one of the greatest churches ever built. By 637 CE, Muslim armies conquered Baalbek, and the site transformed again. This time, the temples became a fortress also known as Kala. It's why the locals still call it Kalat Baalbek today. Over the centuries, dynasty after dynasty left their mark. The Umayyads, Abbasids, Fatimids, and Ayyubids, each one reshaping walls, adding towers, and building new structures on top of ancient foundations. What we have today is essentially a historical layered cake. Every civilization that touched this place left something behind. But here's the thing that keeps haunting researchers. Who were the very first people to lift those impossibly massive foundation stones into place? Who made the original decision that this hill would become a stage for gods, emperors, and conquerors for thousands of years? But every great mystery deserves some serious investigation. So the big question everyone wants answered is pretty straightforward. How did ancient people move stones weighing over 1,000 tons? The theories that researchers have come up with are absolutely mind-bending, some as puzzling as the mystery itself. Let's start with the most obvious theory: wooden rollers and ramps. At first glance, it sounds pretty logical. You place these monster stones on cylindrical wooden logs, which reduces friction, and then you just push or pull them across the ground. Simple physics, right? When archaeologists actually tried to test this theory in real life, it was a complete disaster. Richard Atkinson, a respected archaeologist, attempted to move just a replica Stonehenge blue stone, a tiny stone compared to Baalbek's giants. The moment they started pulling it uphill, the whole thing began sliding sideways uncontrollably. In another experiment, researchers were transporting a replica statue when it suddenly lost balance, tumbled right off the rollers, and smashed into pieces. Now picture trying this with stones that are literally hundreds of times heavier, across nearly a mile of rocky, uneven terrain. So researchers pivoted to what seemed like a more promising explanation: Roman engineering genius. And let's be honest, the Romans were absolutely incredible builders. They created crane systems that were centuries ahead of their time. Their basic model, the tripastos, used a simple setup: a winch, rope, and 3 pulleys. Then they upgraded to the pentaspastos with 5 pulleys. But their heavy-duty machine was the polypastos with 15 pulleys, 4 masts, and just 4 people to lift 2.2 pounds. When they added tread wheels to the mix, they could handle up to 4.4 pounds. For the really massive jobs, Romans built these enormous wooden lifting towers powered by teams of people and animals working a capstan together. For way too long, modern scholars have seriously underestimated ancient workers, dismissing them as basically unskilled laborers. But that's wrong. These people were brilliant engineers and problem solvers. We have ancient Egyptian paintings showing 172 men working together to haul a colossal statue with just pure human ingenuity and coordination. When you see that kind of teamwork and strategic thinking, you realize these weren't primitive people fumbling around with rocks. But even when you give ancient workers full credit, Baalbek is still in a league of its own. Moving an 800 to 1,000 ton block isn't just a bigger version of dragging a statue. We're talking about a completely different category of challenge. Margaret van Es, from the German Archaeological Institute, actually suggested that human-driven capstans could explain how the Baalbek stones were moved. On paper, it sounds like a solid theory. But here's where the math completely falls apart. Even the most advanced Roman cranes couldn't carry more than 6 tons. 6 tons? We're talking about stones at Baalbek that weigh 800 to 1,000 tons. The Baalbek stones were more than 100 times heavier than what their best equipment could handle. So we're left with this incredible puzzle. If wooden rollers were completely impractical, and even the most sophisticated Roman machinery was laughably inadequate, then how did they do it? After centuries of research, countless experiments, and heated academic debates, we are still left scratching our heads. No single theory fully explains how this was accomplished. The stones were simply too massive for any lifting technology we know the Romans possessed, and dragging them across that rocky terrain seems virtually impossible. This has led to some interesting alternative theories. Some researchers insist there must have been lost engineering techniques, sophisticated methods that were perfected by ancient builders but never written down or passed on to future generations. Others have suggested that maybe the stones were never transported at all. What if they were quarried and partially shaped right at the construction site? It's an intriguing possibility, but even that doesn't fully explain the precision and scale of what we see. When you stand at Baalbek today, looking up at those towering columns and impossible stone blocks, it's hard not to feel like you're looking at something that refuses to give up all its secrets. It's a mystery that keeps whispering new questions about what ancient civilizations were truly capable of achieving. Thanks for watching. If you're yet to do so, it's time to smash the like button. And if you enjoy deep dives like this, we have many more ancient mysteries to explore with you. Hit the subscribe button, and we'll see you in the next one.